Good morning. The title of today's video is Stop Simping for Puerto Rico. And I'm actually gonna show you a video from this guy. I don't know who he is. He's gonna mention a lot of things, and I'm gonna pause it at various moments in the video because I'm gonna have to explain what he said. And hopefully this video is not gonna be that long. But anyways, by the way, if you notice that this white guy happens to have an accent, well, I'll come back to that in a little bit. But let's listen to what he has to say.
Yet again, the only time Puerto Rico gets mentioned is when they want to call it dirty and poor. American media probably mentions Puerto Rico about 4 times a year, and it's only to say something negative. Problems in Puerto Rico are completely neglected in American media, the left wing and the right wing. And 99% of Americans don't understand Puerto Rican history at all. Most people don't
To include him, by the way.
know every single problem in Puerto Rico is because of U.S. policy. Puerto Rico is
Completely false, but I'll explain as we go.
still under the Jones Act. They still have to have everything shipped to them on U.S. ships with U.S. crewmen and U.S. ports. Puerto Rico
You know who is also under the Jones Act? Hawaii. Is Hawaii a territory? No. Is Hawaii called Puerto Rico? No. What is Hawaii? A state. So this is not something that applies just to Puerto Rico because the U.S. feels like messing with Puerto Ricans. No, this is the law of the land. Now, granted, there are some territories that don't have this Jones Act be applied to them, and those are territories such as the U.S. Virgin Islands, such as Guam. But if you look at their GDP, it is minuscule compared to the GDP that is produced in Puerto Rico and in Hawaii. So in order for them to not have to seriously struggle, economically speaking, they were granted a waiver so that they don't have to abide by the law of the land. But that's the reason why. I forgot the name of this fighter. I love the UFC. As a matter of fact, there's gonna be a fight with this very famous Hawaiian fighter coming up, and he's gonna be well. Anyways, the point being is that he was talking on a podcast about the fact that Hawaii also gets the Jones Act, and obviously he's against it. So it's very clear to me that this guy, Trevor D. Smith, that's his name, doesn't even know about the laws of his nation and how they apply. Let's continue.
Rico receives half the funding of our poorest state, Mississippi, which is almost the same exact size and population. They cannot.
So he says that Puerto Rico receives half the funding of the poorest state of our nation, Mississippi. You know what Puerto Rico also doesn't do? Well, actually doesn't do? They don't pay federal income tax. As in, if you are a legal resident in Puerto Rico, you don't pay federal income tax. The only way that you actually pay federal income tax in Puerto Rico is if you are, say, you are a legal resident of Puerto Rico, but you have businesses in the U.S. Well, because you have businesses in the U.S., the money that you make in the U.S. will be taxed But if you make money in Puerto Rico, you will not. As a matter of fact, if you are a federal worker in Puerto Rico as a legal resident of Puerto Rico, what you have to do is every year, because you are a federal worker, a federal employee, you will have to file the federal income tax. But that doesn't mean filing taxes is not the same thing as having to pay in taxes. So what's gonna happen is the federal government will see that you are a resident of the territory of Puerto Rico, and everything you paid into the federal government, they will give back to you, because that's your only source of income in this case, right? Like I said, if you were to have a secondary job, but it's also in Puerto Rico, you will still not get taxed. The only way that you have to pay federal income tax is if you make money from businesses in the U.S. as a local legal resident of Puerto Rico. This guy doesn't know that. So, in my opinion, if we are to be actually fair, Puerto Ricans shouldn't receive anything that comes from the budget that is made from whatever people that actually do pay into the federal income tax. Like, there's a bunch of things like road construction, welfare. There are things that are paid by the people that do work and do pay federal income tax in the states. Well, if those things are also being paid to Puerto Rico as part of that half the amount that the poorest state receive, which is Mississippi, they shouldn't even be getting it at all, because they don't pay federal income tax. Do you think it's fair that you pay federal income tax, but other people don't pay federal income tax, yet they get paid for that which they don't pay into? I'm pretty sure that if you're not a tard, the word actually starts with RE, you're not gonna be happy with that. So, in my opinion, they shouldn't be receiving any money whatsoever that comes from the budget that is made from the federal income tax. But let's continue.
Get funding from anybody else because they are a U.S. territory. They are not a nation, so they can't get international funding. And
you know what that actually is? It's not like money that much like the U.S. actually does, which is actually literally handing them money for having done nothing. And by having done nothing, I mean having contributed nothing, because as I said, they don't pay federal income tax. The U.S. literally does this. What he actually means by that, however, is not being able to get loans from international organizations. So get further in debt. That's what this guy wants Puerto Rico to be able to do. Not only are they currently in debt, no, he wants them to get further in debt by being able to get loans from international organizations. Because as I said, unlike the US, which literally hands them money that they should not be getting, these international organizations are not gonna do that. Let's continue.
1898, that is when U.S. took Puerto Rico from Spain
actually, no. The U.S. didn't take Puerto Rico to Spain. You know what actually happens? during that time, after the Spanish-American War, Spain decided to sell certain territories and give away, like, for free, like, I don't care, like that, some territories. And you know, which was one of those territories that Spain just said, you know what, whatever, just take it. Puerto Rico. This is actual history, my friends.
Invasion, and their pay was literally cut in half the day they became a part of America. The first American governor of Puerto Rico quit his job after a year and a half because there was a major hurricane and bought the land that was destroyed in the hurricane, used it to set up a...
You know what? I actually call that being smart. It is being smart. I mean, it's not nice, but you know, if you're if you are someone with a brain, right, a functioning brain, capable of thinking just a little bit, you're gonna be like, well, I mean, they're probably gonna sell the land, whatever that part of the land was, for cheaper now, so I'm gonna buy it. Now, the other person didn't have to sell it, but the person decided to sell it for less, and I, putting myself as that person that he's talking about, say, you know what, I'm just gonna buy it because it's cheaper now. What's the problem?
Monoculture, and they also raised the taxes of all the farmers in Puerto Rico and stole their land and turned it into monocultures too. This is where we get domino sugar. We banned...
Actually, I'm not 100% on this. However, not too long after, the U.S. started to industrialize Puerto Rico. And that's how well, in Puerto Rico, they started getting a lot of like pharmacies and other, industrial work, which was actually better for the economy of Puerto Rico. So, although I can't say for sure that the U.S. in the beginning made Puerto Rico have to monoculture, the sugar canes. If you actually look at my videos, I always put a person in front of a sugar cane field, because that's part of the actual history of Puerto Rico, right? But I cannot say that this whole sugar cane monoculture thing was because of the U.S. But what I can say, however, is the fact that not too long after, the U.S. decided to industrialize the economy of Puerto Rico, which actually did help greatly, especially when the whole Cold War was happening and the U.S. wanted to prove that capitalism was actually better, more efficient than communism, and so it made Puerto Rico surpass Cuba, which before then was actually the jewel of the Caribbean. Well, yes, Puerto Rico, in fact, surpassed Cuba. And that's because of the industrialization that happened because of the U.S. wanting to make the economy in the island better. He's not actually mentioning this, however, because obviously, he wants to make Puerto Rico and its people be a victim. This is the victim narrative. But let's continue.
Their native language, we banned their native flag and gave them felonies if they resisted. He's
saying that the U.S. banned the native language. Actually, no. What happened was the same thing that happened in every single territory in the nation. The U.S. implemented the school system to be in English. But Puerto Ricans, to this day, They are like that target family member who everyone else is in the same at the same level, right? In this case, everyone else speaks the same language because we gotta be able to communicate amongst each other, right? Very important. I can give you an example of this. In the Philippines, which by the way was one of those other territories that the U.S. used to have, because Spain actually that was one of those. Like for example, the Philippines, Guam, Cuba, along with Puerto Rico, were territories that the U.S. gained after the Spanish-American War. Like I said, some were actually sold to the U.S., some were given away. But anyways, in the Philippines, they have a bunch of different dialects. But their main dialect, actually, as a matter of fact, in the Philippines, there is an island where people speak Spanish with the Spanish accent. You know, with the Z, as the same way they pronounce things in Spain. In the Philippines, it is like that. They have a bunch of dialects, but the one language that unifies everyone in the Philippines is Tagalog, because they gotta be able to communicate amongst each other. Well, in the nation, which includes the 50 states and all of its territories, the only target family member that still can't communicate with the rest of the nation is Puerto Rico. I'm gonna get into that in a little bit, you know. Oh, by the way, and preventing the U.S. flag, the Puerto Rico flag from being displayed, that's false. Let's continue. Also, sorry. He said that Puerto Ricans were forbidden from speaking their native language. Well, I don't know if this guy knows, but Spanish is not the native language of Puerto Rico. Actually, before that, they had whatever language the Taino tribe used to speak, right? Then they brought the Africans. Yeah, this is for you guys that think that only the Anglo-Saxons in the U.S. brought slaves from Western Africa into the mainland, the U.S. No. Spaniards actually brought Africans to Puerto Rico. So now we had, people that speak whatever language was spoken by the Taino, whatever languages was spoken by those West Africans, and Spanish. And the Spaniards, much like the US, was like, well, we gotta be able to communicate among each other. So they made everyone speak Spanish. But that is not the native language of the land of what is known as Puerto Rico. But let's continue.
Puerto Rican nationalists were targeted by the CIA in Operation Chaos, so their fight for independence was always shot down.
You know why that was? Because they were actually, I'm gonna use a different word because I don't want YouTube to cancel me, but they were terrorizers, like literal terrorizers. Like they actually went into bases and exterminated military personnel. Like they actually went into Congress. People like Lolita Lebron and other people went into Congress and started shooting in there. Yeah, they were terrorizers. So of course, if you have natives, as in people from your own nation, I'm not talking about Puerto Ricans. I'm talking about Puerto Rico. At this point in time, they are a U.S. territory. So they are natives, much like in the U.S. You were to have other people like Ted Kaczynski, if they would have known that Ted Kaczynski was a terrorizer, believe me, the CIA would have been after these people, Ted Kaczynski, much like they were with people like Los Macheteros, for example. Because, of course, it makes sense. But I guess this guy wants terrorizers to be around doing whatever terrorizers like to do, which is basically exterminating innocent people. Let's continue.
Drafted to fight in our wars, yet they can't vote in our general or...
Yeah, actually, Puerto Ricans are drafted to fight in the U.S. wars because you know what they are? They are U.S. citizens. But he says they are not able to vote in the general elections. And that is true. But you know why that is? Because of the no taxation without representation. So, as I mentioned earlier, Puerto Ricans don't pay federal income tax, right? So, because they don't get to pay federal income tax, they are not getting taxation, and so they don't get representation, right? And I'm pretty sure a bunch of you would love to say, you know what? I'm just gonna give up my privilege to be able to vote in the general elections, you know, like choose who my president is gonna be, and my congressman and my senator, all that good stuff for the federal government, and I'm just gonna not pay federal taxes. I'm pretty sure a bunch of you guys would be like, you know what? That sounds like a legit trade to me. And me being a libertarian, hence why I have this symbol, hence why I have this tattoo, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. But yes, as U.S. citizens, people can be, well, back in the day when the draft existed, were drafted. Ever since the draft was eliminated, people can decide whether or not they can go into the military. And so they freely do that. But let's continue. And I'll go back into that in a little bit.
Elections, and the veterans get half the benefits from the VA as they would if they were in the States.
That is completely false. Veterans get 100% disability pay wherever they are. Like, they could even be, like, they don't even have to be on a state or territory. They could be anywhere in the world and they will get the exact same pay. So that is completely false. Let's continue.
We forced sterilization of Puerto Rican women from 1930s to 1970s, and...
Oh, you know who did that? Planned Parenthood. Oh, and you know who also agreed to that? Local, as in Puerto Rican politicians. Yeah, you know, this same thing that Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger promoted in, places where a lot of black people lived. You know, that kind of thing that still happens to this day in places where a lot of black people live. Yeah, that actually did in fact happen. And that is in fact still happening. Yeah. So, and that is thanks to Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood. And as I said, local politicians, like Puerto Rican politicians, that agreed to that. But let's continue.
This whole time, Puerto Rico has done absolutely nothing wrong to America. Yet we...
Well, I mean, if you think about the fact that they have been leeching, as in getting paid for something that they don't contribute into, I would say, yeah, that is very wrong. Because you, of course, want to be fair, right? But let's continue.
We are racist towards them. We hate them. Any opportunity we get to talk about them and open our mouths about Puerto Rico, we say some stupid shit. It disgusts me, the amount of ignorance of Americans. They don't even give a shit about Puerto Ricans, even when they are bold enough to open their mouths and speak about them. I made a video talking about this when Bad Bunny was getting hated on in America. And it's just like, why are we making enemies with people who have done nothing wrong to us and we have done everything wrong to them? Why does nobody want to come up with a plan, left or right, on how to fix Puerto Rico? Why are all of their bills that they passed to become a state rejected? I think...
You know what? Why this was? Because these were bills that were not approved by Congress. And you know who actually owns Congress? Or sorry, who owns Puerto Rico? Congress. And by the way, sorry for getting scared. I was not expecting to receive a phone call. But yeah, it's because these were not approved by Congress. But let's continue.
I think the reason nobody wants to fix it is because the problem exposes the failure and end result of capitalism. And right-wing people hate talking about Puerto Rico because they can't even use the defense that...
Yeah, I knew this guy. He was one of them guys. He talked about the failures of capitalism. Of course, to be expected.
Oh, we brought them civilization. They already were getting paid better. They had a better life with Spain. They were all...
You know what kind of better life they had with Spain? It just so happens that during those days, people were actually living in huts, like little mud huts, like where the floor is mud. Like they didn't have a university because Spain did not want them to actually get educated. You know who actually built the first university in Puerto Rico? The US. Because you know why? They didn't want them to be taught. So I'm pretty sure Spain did not actually help them as much as you think.
Already managing and working on their own independence when America swept in and made their lives work. We need to free Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico either needs to become a fully funded state, and we need to fully love and embrace them, or they need to gain their own independence. And either way, we need to pay the tab. We have to pay the bill and inherit their debt. And I really...
So basically, you're saying that, for example, say you who is listening to this video, you are fairly good with your finances. You're not perfect. You have some loans of your own, right? So you actually do have some debt. But a family person, a relative of yours says, you know what? I'm just going to start getting loans, start living the life like a mofo. And I don't know who's going to pay for it, but I'm not going to pay for it, you know, like Alejandro Garcia Padilla did a couple of years ago, right? Even though it's written in the Constitution that the debt needs to be paid before everything else. That's actually part of the Constitution in Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico does have its own Constitution. So they were like, you know what? I'm not going to pay for it. And then this relative of yours, which is Puerto Rico, right? Now has the debt collectors roaming. And are you who is listening gonna be like, you know what? I do have some loans that I have to pay that I acquired on my own, but I am fairly responsible with my finances. Am I gonna add to my own fiscal problems those of this is irresponsible family member of mine? I'm pretty sure you're gonna say that, right? Well, that is essentially what this guy is saying.
I really hope this video reaches Americans, not just Puerto Ricans. I hope Americans start to study the history of Puerto Rico, because there is a...
And I hope that this guy, as an American, starts learning Puerto Rican history, because it is very obvious to me that he knows nothing of Puerto Rico history, and neither does he know anything about his own history, the one from the US.
A lot to learn from it. There are a lot of mistakes that were made that can be avoided today. They are using the same playbook that they used on Black Americans and Native Americans.
Who did that? Actually, as I said, Planned Parenthood. That's the playbook. Because if he's gonna come at me with the fact that Black Americans are actually still, a part of this big family, the ones that are still mediocre, well, that's actually on them. Much like it is on Puerto Rico that they are the way that they are, because they have been given, Puerto Rico and blacks have been given benefits to actually help them not be as mediocre as they are, and yet here they are, right? But let's continue.
And Mexican Americans and Hawaiians and in the Philippines, it's the same playbook of colonialism and capitalism. I don't want to hear anybody mention Puerto Rico.
By the way, the Philippines, they decided to go independent after World War II. So this is not something that actually, as a matter of fact, Cuba became independent even before the Philippines. So it's not like the US is actually keeping Puerto Rico hostage. Like, for some reason, Puerto Rico is so much more valuable than Cuba or the Philippines were. No. Puerto Ricans simply never voted to be independent. They have never in the history of Puerto Rico voted to be independent. So they are not being held captive.
Unless they got something positive and uplifting to say, unless they are coming up with a plan to help them and to make their lives better. That is the only thing we should be saying about Puerto Rico.
Actually, you know who needs to uplift themselves? Puerto Ricans. Yeah. Because, as I said, things have been done in the past to bring them up. Like I mentioned, part of the history of Puerto Rico is industrializing Puerto Rico, which helped the economy of the island greatly. But here's the thing. You know how I've been talking about the fact that, I'll come back to that later. And you know how I started saying, like, you notice that I have an accent? I'll come back to that later. Well, it just so happens that I'm a real Puerto Rican. Like an actual born and raised Puerto Rican, unlike AOC. And at least AOC, which is not a Puerto Rican, because in order to be a Puerto Rican, you have to be born there, right? Much like a Texan has to be born in Texas, or a New Yorker has to be born in New York. Well, AOC is a New Yorker, right? She was born in New York. But at least I'll give her credit for the fact that she does speak pretty decent Spanish, But this guy is not even like AOC level. He's just some white knight. A literal and metaphorical white knight. Like, this guy knows nothing of what he's actually talking about. And yet, here he is commenting on things that he has no reason to be talking about, other than wanting to show everyone else how virtuous he is, allegedly. But yeah, this guy is actually a born and raised Puerto Rican. So everything I'm talking about is for the simple fact that I was born and raised there, and I know these things. Now, being born and raised there and educating myself there meant that I actually had to teach myself English, because even though in the Puerto Rico education system falls under the federal education system, and they actually receive billions of dollars a year, for which they don't pay into. Now, I will say this. Part of the budget of the education system, half is billions of dollars from the US taxpayer who was forced to pay federal income tax that was then sent to Puerto Rico where they don't pay federal income tax. The other half is from the taxpayer of Puerto Rico, right? But what I'm trying to say with this is that this portion right here, Puerto Rico shouldn't even have because they didn't even contribute into it. Yet they receive it for free, right? Because obviously nothing is free. This was paid for by the federal, by the taxpayer who pays federal income tax in the states. But they shouldn't even be receiving it. Yet they receive billions of dollars every year. Every year, the Puerto Rico population receives billions of dollars to remain mediocre, and yet they still don't speak the language of the land, English. So I had to teach myself the language, which is why I have an accent, which is why I'm pretty sure I have said things incorrectly throughout this whole video. And although the US makes Puerto Rico teach English, they are only forced, or not forced, but like they are only made to teach English in one class. And not even that one class is in English. Because, as I said, I was born and raised there. And I would take English classes where the teacher was actually speaking Spanish to us. And every single year, it was the same thing. It was like, these are pronouns, these are verbs, these are adjectives, these are nouns, these are adverbs. And you will never, ever learn English that way. And that is not because the federal government wants it to be that way. No, that is what the local politicians want. They want to keep people divided, because the best way to divide a population from the rest is by creating a wall, a big, beautiful wall. But this big, beautiful wall is invincible because it's a language wall that prevents us from being able to communicate amongst each other, right? And that is done by Puerto Ricans to Puerto Ricans. Now, the elite, however, those in power from the, population in Puerto Rico, they do send them their sons and daughters to the best schools to learn English. Much like the guy that they have right now in Congress. He's not a congressman. That's not their title. Because territories, as I said, they don't have congressmen. He is, I always, Pablo Jose Hernandez, right? He is part of the elite. So although he likes to grandstand in Congress, and he likes to speak Spanish in Congress, where only a few of them will actually understand him, he is actually quite fluent in English. He might as well be better than me. But I taught myself the English that you hear. He actually went to the best schools. And that's how they want Puerto Ricans to be. This is all done by the Puerto Ricans to the Puerto Ricans. The whole thing about, everything else, I think I actually explained. So I don't think I have to go into anything else. I can, however, say that this guy who is talking to you is actually a veteran, and I was not forced to join the military. I actually retired from the military 2 years ago, and I chose to join the military because I saw how mediocre Puerto Rico has always been. Puerto Rico has always been mediocre. Ever since Puerto Ricans were allowed to choose a born and raised politician to be their governor, Puerto Rico has been mediocre. And you know why that is? It's simple. It's because every single governor, every single, most senators, because they also have senators in Puerto Rico, and they have representatives in Puerto Rico, but like from the local government, that is. But especially every single governor has been a freaking socialist. You could, like I said earlier, when I said, oh, of course he had to talk about the failures of capitalism. No. The fact that Puerto Rico is a failed territory is because of socialism. They love large government, a government that actually imposes things onto the free market to include minimum wage pay. They love that. They actually love welfare programs for which they don't contribute, yet they love them. They love them so much that every year they hope to increase the money that they get for free, right? As I said, this is paid by the taxpayer that actually does pay federal income tax in the nation. But they get it for free because they don't contribute anything into it, and they want more. They love all this stuff that socialists love to promote. And that is the reason why Puerto Rico has always been a failed territory. But the thing is, this is not because Puerto Rico is a territory, that's why they failed. No. Other territories are not failing like Puerto Rico, right? But other territories may not be as socialists as Puerto Rico is. And you can be a state and still be a failed state. For example, California, or New York, or Illinois. Those kinds of states where people are actually fleeing from those states and moving into other states where they don't actually promote this socialism mindset, large government, welfare programs, etc., right? So it is socialism that has made Puerto Rico the failed territory that Puerto Rico is. And this has been done by none other than Puerto Ricans themselves, because they all love socialism. One of the first videos that I made in this channel was in Spanish, and I called it Puerto Ricans are socialists and they don't even know it. I wrote it in, I titled it in Spanish, Los puertorriqueños son socialistas y no lo saben, because that's what they are. And that's why they have always failed. And that's why the black community keeps failing in the US, because they keep loving that welfare state and not actually doing things to better themselves. And when you talk about paying their debt, what you're actually talking is more socialism. Somebody else will pay for that stupid thing that you did and that made you be as mediocre as you currently are. And the thing is, that video had a lot of likes and loves, because a lot of them are probably Boricuas, in quotations, as I love to call them. These people that are retarded, right? And so they hear this white knight, and they get their hearts pumped, and they're like, oh my God, we got this white knight talking on behalf of us. But they don't actually think, is this thing that he's saying true? And if it, whether it is true or not, does it make sense? They think with passion, right? Not with their brain, with the capacity to understand what's being said. And obviously, other of those likes and loves are gonna come from more white knights such as him, because the US is full of Gen Zs and millennials such as him. And it is these people that if they ever get into power will make the US be as mediocre as Puerto Rico has been for decades, ever since they were allowed to elect their own local born and raised governor. They will do the same to the rest of the nation. And like I said, I think I said I was able to explain everything as the video went by. So yeah, now you know who is refuting his arguments. An actual Puerto Rican, born and raised in the island. I left the island at 27 years old because I got fed up with the mediocrity that I lived in the island for 27 years. And they have kept that going even after I left. Which is why I see no future for Puerto Rico. And I pray to God that Puerto Rico never becomes a state. Because if it ever becomes a state, it will have more power to keep unleashing from the rest of the people that works in the nation. And they will be nothing else but another one of those failed states that our nation currently has. So in my opinion, they are better given independence. And with that, I would hope the best for them. They've always liked to compare themselves to small nations that have been great successes, like Singapore. I would hope that for them. But I know that they will never be that because they don't have that mindset. The capitalist, the free market mindset, the individual mindset, like everyone is an individual kind of mindset. They don't have that mindset. They have the Marxist, socialist mindset, big government type thing, which of course leads me to believe that they will be much like Cuba and Venezuela, places where they implemented exactly as socialism dictates, places where they implemented socialism perfectly. That's what they're gonna be, and much like all those places, they will end up in the same level of mediocrity. Right now, the only reason why they are not at that level is because they have people being forced to save their behinds, paying for a bunch of things. But it is obvious to me that if they were ever given independence, they're gonna be the same thing that Cuba is right now and Venezuela is right now. Although, as I said, I would hope the best for them. And I would hope that at some point they open their brains, change their ways of thinking, the way they talk and the way they act. And maybe someday they will in fact be like Singapore. But I doubt it. Having said that, if I have informed you and I made you think, I would hope that you share this video, and it will be until my next video.